My name's Adele Onyango and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Hey, welcome to episode 152 of Legally Clueless. I hope you're doing fantastic. And if this is your first time ever listening to this podcast, welcome to the family. Audio episodes like this go out every single Monday. If you check out our YouTube channel, there's a link to it in the show notes, or just search Legally Clueless on YouTube. You can watch our video series and our tour series. They're pretty awesome. I'm biased, but yes, take my word for it. And as well as join our warm little corner of the internet on Instagram. We're at Legally Clueless Podcast. There's a link in the show notes. And Legally Clueless on Facebook. All right, this is a different type of episode. So before I tell you why, let me share the song of the week, which, by the way, is a classic. I actually was listening to it yesterday with a very good friend of mine while there was like this wild storm in Nairobi. And we were talking about how this particular musician doesn't get the accolades or the celebration and people clapping and acknowledging her as much as we think she should get. So the song is Free by Khadija Neen. And when I listened to this song, I feel like the lyrics were a poem first and then made into a song. But of course, this is just me speculating. There's a line that talks about being free like water, and it's just... It's a beautiful song. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes, or you can just search it on whatever streaming platform. Free by Khadija Neen. All right, so the reason this is a different stroke special episode is that I'm recording this on my birthday. Woo! On the 5th of February. And I was born on that date in 1989. And I figured that we should do a different kind of episode because honestly, it's not enough for me to just do it at the end of every year. I want to have more episodes where it's a conversation, just you and I, or just have like random convos feature a lot more on the podcast. And also, I've been very reflective of age and hitting the third floor. Age not only because of my birthday, but there's a series I am currently binging called Grace and Frankie. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it here on this podcast, but I feel like I've mentioned it to everybody in my life. Grace and Frankie. It's beautiful. Part of the storyline is, huge part of the storyline is following these two women's friendships as they navigate age. And it's just, as I binge it, been at the forefront of like my reflections about how to age well and have like, if that's the universe's plan for me, have very calm sunset years, you know what I mean? Like your 60s. Not a lot of noise or chaos, just like ride it out, you know? Anyway, so because of my reflections on age and being on the third floor, I've turned 33, by the way. I decided that I was going to share some of the lessons that I've learned on this third floor. Turned 33, and I think there is some clarity I've gotten in the past year, you know, that could be tied to my 30s and just lessons that this space has taught me thus far. That's one. And I'm also going to share some of the lessons that my sister Amanda and my sister Anne-Marie, my two friends Seba and my best friend Val, of course, you know, they're going to, a little later in the episode, share one lesson that they learned exclusively in their 30s. For me first. I think the first one I'm currently navigating and just every day telling myself that this is a new truth we have. This is a new truth we're living in. And that's that I can be two things at the same time. I, in the past, found that if I make a mistake or do something that perhaps hurt someone or just make a mistake, while I'm processing whatever this mistake is, I'll be very harsh, very mean with myself. You know, the words that I will use to describe my entire being would be in the lens of this mistake that I've made. So it'll be, oh, you're such a horrible person, or you're mean, you're terrible to others, look, you made that person cry, or they're hurting, or you make that person angry, you are a terrible person. But I've learned that if I make a mistake, if I hurt someone or make them angry, etc., it doesn't erase the good aspects about me or the good things that I've done either in that moment or in the past. Those two things can sit side by side and be true. I can be accountable for my actions and the negative ones at that, plus the negative impact they have on either me or others. But at the same time, that doesn't erase the good that I am. I feel like in the past, it was always one or the other for me. And I was loudest when it came to negative things. So I'm currently just kind of swimming through something that feels like one of the hugest mistakes I've ever made. But obviously we kind of view every mistake like that. You're just like, this is the worst mistake ever. And then 5 years later, this is the worst mistake, So I'm doing that. I'm swimming through this mistake, and I noticed it's sipping into other aspects of my life, like my work. And it would mean even in those spaces, I would attribute perceived failures to this mistake that had nothing to do with my career. But because I'm like using this one word to describe my entire being, using this one negative thing, I forget that there's a lot of good that I'm doing or achieving, or that I am. And so that's a very top thing that I'm learning. I've also kind of accepted that living is this dance where we're constantly trying to make a decision between a fearless and free life or a quote unquote safe life. And just with any dance, you'll linger on one side longer. Oh, mosquito. What was I saying? Yeah, so just like any dance, you'll linger on one side longer than the other. Now, I don't know whether dancing between these two is a good or a bad thing. I feel like that's what I do, and I'm extending grace to myself by saying, hey, a huge part of the motion of living is dancing between these two. The reason I say I'm not sure if, this thing I'm doing is good or bad is a fearless and free life. For me right now is making those very difficult decisions that allow me to be free, like perhaps cut off people that see me up and move from Nairobi to Diani, which is one of my greatest goals. So basically a life where you're doing everything you want to do and not really trying to be safe about it, which brings in the other side, which is the safe life. Sometimes this makes sense. I've seen very many people play it safe and just go through the motions of life like they've seen other people do before. And perhaps outside looking in, it looks like it works for them. For me, I find that with a safer option, I accept subpar treatment because, you get a bit more desperate when it comes to trying to be safe about your life and trying to do things the way everybody else has done it. But I'm not here to tell you which choice to make. I've just been very reflective or understanding of the fact that it's okay. Take your time. You're dancing between these two things. One day you'll be courageous enough to pick which side you stand on. So I've obviously spent a much shorter time in my 30s than in my 20s, but I've found that on this third floor, I've ended up missing my mom possibly the most in comparison with my 20s. I find that there's a very calm and clear awareness of her absence, and that I have a very intricate understanding of grief. It's almost like in my 30s, I took grief out on a date and was like getting to know it. What I found is grief is cold and lonely. Oof. So lonely. Even just recording this on my birthday. Today, I feel like a good 1 hour. I intensely missed my mom. Most of my birthdays are pretty loud in the sense that there's people around me. It's hard to sit in silence. But I've been having a lot more silence the older I get. And the greatest thing silence gives is clarity. You can hear your emotions. And I think today I could really hear my emotions at one point. For a good 1 hour, I really miss my mom, and I allowed myself to sit in it for a bit and think about, well, I wonder what we would do if she was here. I know she would have gotten me a bouquet of flowers. That was something that she did. I know there'd be cake. It was just something really to sit in those feelings and to acknowledge her absence. And I think this is a lesson in my 30s. Grief on this third floor has been less disruptive than it was in my 20s, so I'm able to learn from it. So far, it's taught me just the fickleness of my own life, and I think I've made a lot of headway in accepting my immortality. Just knowing that every moment I've experienced was not automatic. I just happened to have been given that moment, and not to live in some form of fear about it, but to become about it. So, for example, I just came back from Ethiopia yesterday, actually, and had possibly the worst flight back in my life. Because for a good 30 plus minutes, it was hell in terms of turbulence on that plane. And I remember, like, once the turbulence started, I was listening to some ratchet ass music, and I had to change quickly to some Laurent Vula, because I was just like, hey, if I'm gonna die, let me just let them find something deep that I was listening to, you know what I mean? Anyway, so I had this whole entire thought, but it was crazy. We were being like flung up from our seats, and my stomach is just like, can't take it. The woman next to me is telling me how she wants to throw up. The air hostesses couldn't even make it back to their seats. They've like sat besides us. It was hell. And I remember at a point thinking, I think we're crashing. I've never been in a plane crash, but I think this is what it's meant to feel like, and that this pilot doesn't have things under control. But even then, I didn't panic. I was like, well, I guess if this is how it ends, I mean, I would have hoped for something less painful, but hey, here we are now. And it struck me as odd that I was quite okay, because I've been in that situation before where like a plane is just going crazy, and that one was a much smaller plane. God, that was like a terrible flight. I remember even grabbing the hand of the guy beside me, and we were strangers. Some rugby guy, and I grabbed his hand so tight. Like, we've been boys for years. But that one, I was freaking out. I was just like, Yanni, I'm just going to die like this. I can see this death coming. I can't even SMS anyone to be like, yo, last words. I'm just gone. Anyway, I digressed. Basically, what I'm saying is, on the third floor, grief has taught me to accept my immortality. If I die now, that's not in my control. I might not understand what comes after death, but I understand that my death is inevitable. And I think very many people run away from that. It's scary. You want to know what comes next. So you'll find yourself in the arms of like dubious religions, just because there's a lack of acceptance of your immortality, and just knowing that this is just what life is. You live and then you die, and nobody really knows what comes afterwards, and that's okay. We shouldn't focus our efforts on that. The efforts should be on trying to live as much as possible. And another thing that I have learned or understood is just how precious silence is. Oh my goodness. When you hear these things about protect your energy, your space, peace of mind, like all these good things that are good for you spiritually and emotionally, I think they're all held up by silence, by the absence of noise. And I've learned how precious that is in my 30s. I think one of the things that has helped me learn that is going on my solo trips, and just for those 4 or 5 days being surrounded by no one, having no noise around me, and just like losing myself in the things that I love, like poetry, which is a sense of silence, isn't it? Where you leave everything noise out and you just dive into what you love. And those moments have given me clarity in like making decisions or trying to understand a challenging experience, the thing that I'm navigating. I found that when it's too noisy, I can't think, I can't process, I can't come up with solutions. And sometimes noise is not just, for those of us who live in Nairobi, yes, physical noise, because this is one big construction site. Sometimes the noise is not just, the source of the thing that is a challenge to you, or a particular environment. If it's maybe a toxic job, that space can be considered as noise. It's not only just that. I think noise is also the people who you ask for help when it comes to navigating something difficult. Sometimes you can ask so many people that you get so many different perspectives and solution ideas, which again, sometimes it's not bad, but I've learned that that can be noisy. What you truly want and what you truly feel can get lost in that noise. And sometimes it helps to disengage, isolate yourself completely, and just be silent enough to hear your innermost thoughts, hear what that inner voice is telling you to do or is pushing you towards. There's always something inside speaking to us, but we're on the go. So much is happening and it's just so noisy. So third floor has definitely taught me how precious silence is. So I asked the lovely ladies in my life, what is one lesson they've learned in their 30s? All the people you will hear from are at various stages in their 30s, and the people you will hear from are my two sisters, Anne-Marie and Amanda, and my two closest friends, Sebawali, Sio, and my best friend, Val.
The biggest lesson I learned when I turned 30, it's never that serious. Take life easy. Yeah, because life is short and we all die. I learned to hydrate and moisturize. Very important. Your body is not the same.
One thing that I learned in my 30s, or should I say that I'm learning in my 30s, is to give people the grace. You really don't know what people are going through, or even if you have an understanding, their background, their experiences and everything doesn't mean that they'll go through it the same way that you do. So just extend people grace, be kind to them, try to just be patient with them, because you may think you know, but a lot of the times you really just have no idea.
I should have thought about this more. I'm going to go with what she said. I'll add on to it, but I'll add on to what she said. I think we need to allow people grace and give people not necessarily second chances, but just more patience with how things are going. And if things don't go your way or the way they're supposed to, just allow people some form of grace in all elements. Financially, emotionally. You guys are going through it a lot. I think what I was going to say before that, because I hadn't thought of that, was I think in my 30s, I am learning to be less apologetic. I think I've always lived like that or tried to, but I think now it's more like so affirmative. I'm so sure about what I'm doing and about myself that you can't tell me anything. Like, but you can give me constructive criticism, but you're not gearing me away from, like, this.
Those four ladies are so important to me, and each of their lessons is so important. Of course, Amanda is the one who said that it's never that serious, and I love that. Anne-Marie, who's been on the podcast before, talked about hydrate and moisturize. Let me tell you, I wish you could see the way I am so religious about my face routine, which is very different than when I was in my 20s, because I could just sleep with a full face of makeup and wake up the next morning and things would be all right. Hey. I did that once, I think maybe when I was 30, and where the face that woke up, very scary. Can never repeat. I also like, Saba and Val talking about extending grace to others, because you just really don't know what people are battling. That's very important. And of course, living a very unapologetically you life, that is a major key. I remember saying that when I hit my 30s, it's almost like there was a switch that somebody just hit and it cut off all the fucks I used to give. And the longer I stay on the third floor, like the worse it gets. Worse, but in a good way. I really like it. So yeah, you kind of feel more unapologetic about being you 100%. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. A bit of a twist from other episodes, but yeah, I thought I'd do something different for the birthday episode. And since for my birthday, I did hang out with some of the most important people to me, top of the list, of course, being my two nieces and nephew. I'm going to leave you with a few random sounds from them. Well, from my nieces. My nephew was too busy eating to care about speaking into a recorder.
Say something. Say hello. Oh no, don't bite it. Say hello. You've left the cake you're eating in his face. Okay, don't pull my hair, sis.
Mama.
That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.